to Oslo and the new Deichman Jarvika Library for one of the two last sessions of the BIM Summit 2023. We will be joined by a panel whom I'll introduce to you briefly. However, I do remind you that there was a poll on the theme whether it's time to rethink business models. So please scan your QR codes and answer that question so we can get a feel for whether you in the audience think that it's time to rethink business models. During that, the poll answering of the poll, I will introduce to you also the panelists that have joined me. In Stockholm, we have Martin Burrows from Symetri, we have Linn Areno from Skanska, and Pontus Bengtson from Autodesk. Here in Oslo, I'm joined by Kristine Slotina and Angie Mendez and Per-Ole Otternes. From Symetri, A-Lab, and Nordic Office of Architecture. Welcome back to all of you. Now, panelists, by show of hands, if you agree, do you think it's time to rethink business models? Okay, all of you. There was some hesitation, but you succumbed to peer pressure. Lovely. We'll see what the audience says. 96% of you agree. Okay, so we seem to be in agreement that it's time to rethink business models. Now let's talk a bit then about how and perhaps why and dive a little bit deeper into this. Symetri has identified 5 different claims supporting the thesis of the need to rethink business models. So we'll talk about those 5 claims. 6 brilliant minds, 5 different claims, and 20 minutes, okay? First up, the first claim will be this one. There are increasing demands on designers, from legislative, from entrepreneurs, from developers, that demands new ways of working, new tools introduced, and new standards and such. Per-Ole Otternes, Symetri, do you agree to this claim? Is this one of the reasons we should rethink business models?
Yes, I think so. So that's
why?
the easy answer. That's a yes. You guys are constantly being challenged with new standards. As I said, we talk about MMI for BIM models, taxonomy, sustainability, and constantly need to train yourselves in these new demands. You need to purchase new software. You need to train yourselves on that. So you have an increase of costs to be able to deliver, and that should be paid in the other end. But we are still working on our rate, and as far as I know, the hour rates don't increase. So this doesn't match.
So bigger need to develop and demands on decreasing costs. Angie Mendez, A-Lab, what are your thoughts on this claim and rethinking business models?
That is totally true. I sit in Architects Bedrift in a BIM group, and it's a common understanding that architects feel a little bit squeezed, almost underappreciated. And our answer to that is to make sure that you have a roadmap for technology development, but that is transparent and understandable by everybody. Because you cannot do this alone as experts. We need to gather support and engagement from everybody in the organization. And as humans, we build culture around a fireplace. So the common ground, the underlay, needs to be understandable by everybody. And this roadmap needs to have an ultimate goal, but with milestones along the way that you can actually evaluate. Because remember that you cannot improve what you cannot measure. So these milestones need to be tailor-made for the DNA of your company, your types of projects and clients. And you need to understand what are the conditions or the assumptions for that to be successful. What is actually a requirement, what is innovation, and what is the next big thing. And adapt and make sure that you prioritize accordingly. And just because the technology is popular, it doesn't mean that you have to make it your own purpose. Everybody's talking about AI, and maybe you sit that one out and wait until the technology is mature enough to be implemented quickly. So just tailor-made to what you need to answer on, and do it gradually to make sure that you are able to be dynamic and answer to the needs that come and change all the time.
Linn, just briefly, do you agree with Per's analysis of increasing demands for reskilling, perhaps, and also the demands on lowering your costs, just as a follow-up to what he was talking about?
Yeah, definitely. But I also think that we need to look on competences, because I don't think it's just about the business model. We also need competences in different structured ways in the different parties that are within.
Okay, thank you. Now, moving on, claim 2. See, this is the tempo that this session is moving forward in. Claim 2 is this one. We are underusing digital models that we develop. Models can be used during both projects and development and construction. Can we be better at perhaps creating useful data? We've heard throughout the days that 96% of the data is unused. Pontus, Autodesk, what do you say on that one?
Thank you, Jan. It's an interesting claim, though, because yeah, from a business model view, I'm wondering if should we create more useful data? I mean, maybe we should use the data we have. And so it's maybe that is the way to phrase it. And then I also believe Linn and me talked over lunch a lot of this kind of, this I see as a low-hanging fruit because, well, isn't this what we're supposed to do? Don't we have a proudness in what we actually deliver in our products, how we actually design a road, how we optimize the road, as the infra guy I am, and how we actually make the best of it from every cost, sustainability, and so on. So I almost feel a little bit like it's we're a little bit, why are we claiming this? Shouldn't we just do it? To paraphrase another great company. So that's my view on this one. So absolutely, yeah, sure, but I can't see why we're not. And be more proud of what the engineers we are and the architects we are and what we actually produce.
So we are underusing them, but we shouldn't because we should be more proud of and see it as a natural part of the new way of working. Is that it?
Well, you could say, I guess that we see that a lot of companies, especially in the consulting world, are now set up as industries, fabrics with fabric workers that they just produce and not really, they produce hours and they produce data, but actually maybe they are not producing a product. So once again, that we have heard over all those 2 days, that actually we focus more on the outcome, we focus more on the actual product. Well, this would be in line with that, wouldn't it? That we test more alternatives and so on, that we actually use the data for that, not just produce the hours to get the utilization grade. So I think that is where I want to go at.
Kristine, Slotina, you talked earlier, just 15, 20 minutes or half an hour ago about how you used data to collaborate in an international airport project. Do you think we're underusing digital tools?
Yeah, so, I actually think it's really interesting that we're using term data because there's a researcher called Glick and he talks about data is like amount of things, right? Which we try to extract from data, we try to extract information, right? And from information, we try to extract knowledge. So data can be like a huge thing, and then the information from that data extracted is a smaller piece, and the knowledge out of that is even smaller. So I think like actually thinking what information we need and what knowledge we want to create out of that information is something we need to think about, and not about the huge blob of data that we are creating, because, well, it also depends of maybe we can reduce this data amount and still get the same information and knowledge that we need. So that's just a thought, I think, to think about is like, okay, how much of this data we need to extract to knowledge?
And what data, of course,
yes.
to gain what knowledge, yeah. I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. That happens sometimes. Claim number 3, let's move on. Today's business models favors sharing of dead or dumb data. We're on the same kind of theme here. To explain that a little bit further, it the claim also supports the idea of that we continue to turn BIM models into 2D drawings. So we do the work, but then we dumb it down in a way, if you pardon my French. Linn, Areno, Skanska, do you agree to that point?
That we do it today, definitely. We don't leverage on what we have, but we also see lack of information in what we have. But we need to shift focus, and I'm going back on competences, so we need to look at that even for the data part from models to 2D, because we have a lack of competence and lack of knowledge on why we should do it and why we should do it another way. But I also think that there is a layer where we have data that isn't even possible to get out on a 2D drawing from a model, which should be separate and should be in something else. And connected to what Theo said this morning, we are seeing different structures to take care of data, and we cannot live on 2D models anymore.
Mm-hmm. But would that be another way of supporting the last claim, that we're underusing the models that we've developed? We're not using them to the full extent in that context as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And Per-Ole, what are your thoughts on this claim that we're dumbing down the usage?
Well, I'm thinking we should go back to the business models again. Because the most contracts when you build say that you have to build according to this 2D document, and you do, because that's your job. If you were to turn that and demand that you build after a model like Theo were talking about, I know it's difficult, and I know that we need to train ourselves into the competence of actually doing that and to solve some problems, but think big. We said that earlier. Think big and try to achieve that goal. And I think it starts with the business model. We need to go away from building after a drawing and try to move ahead or to build after model.
Mm-hmm. Angie, you talked about Project Fornebubanen yesterday, how you used VR and a very high-tech way of collaborating as well. Was there did you experience the dumbing down of the data that you had been creating when it came time to start constructing, or did you manage to use it? And if so, how did that impact the business model side of it?
The strategy of the client is not to allow drawings unless you go through a very exhausting application process to discourage us from creating drawings that could easily be replaced with 3D models.
So that was the customer demand?
Yes.
So customer driving business models then, or ways of working anyway?
Yeah, anyways, help us find this common ground where we at least have a very clear goal to achieve. And then if you need a drawing, then it's because you really need it.
Okay. Pontus, do you feel that there's a risk perhaps that at Autodesk that what you are doing is not being used to the full potential in this aspect, as we're talking about it right now, that we're also using the models but then dumbing it down? Do you see that? Do you think there's anything that you could do to perhaps decrease the amount of dumbing down?
Yeah, absolutely. Or we could look at the other way around. I'm a pragmatic guy quite often, and I think everybody's here have customer and clients in all different ranges. That some of them we're talking about, they are able to take care of these models. We also have contractors that they have one machine, and to ask them today. So I would say that we can help with, let's automate that. So let's dumb it down in a very quick way that actually take no hours at all. So what do you mean? It's an output. We say dumb down, well, it's one extraction from one purpose. So if the purpose is that we have this one who needs this kind of information, it happens to be 2D, it happens to be in black and white, it happens to be in PDF, well, that's an outcome from this information model. So I'm a little bit like, I don't really agree with how it's phrased, because I see it would be quite dangerous for our whole economics if we go like, yeah, right, so everybody that can't do this now, you're out of business. And that won't happen, will it? So we need to be pragmatic with this. So maybe that is where we need to have a more sober discussion around it. So let's and also this kind of, what are we actually making money on? So maybe we should say that let's try to stop make money on creating dumb data and make money on doing the smart data, and then we have an outcome that is for free. Could be a thing.
Do you think it would be possible to monetize the right kind of data or the right kind of information?
Was that for me? Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're going to hear a lot about that in the session after us. But I mean, I feel it's a little bit about the belief, and also we have always about selling stuff, taking a risk. So of course we can. We're doing it. People are doing this. So I can't say we're not doing it. Well, everybody was at my presentation, the bell curve. We're not doing it in the majority of the projects and so on. But it is done, and it's proven it works. So let's be bold. Let's do it once again. Let's make it. That's our new one.
Okay. So moving on then to claim number 4. Martin, do you agree with the claim that business models, as of today, not are designed to focus on quality and budget, but rather perhaps hours or billing and stuff like that?
Yes, I agree on that. And as you said, that the billing on hours, in my opinion, is a bad thing because it inhibits innovation. So we want to move from that, and that's where in Sweden and in Nordic we're actually billing more per hour in the project compared to other markets in the rest of Europe. So there we have a lot of work to do. And I believe that if we can go towards models where we have shared risk, where we try to find fixed price or at least shared risk within the stakeholders, then it will be much more innovative.
Linn, would you be prepared to share the risk as a constructor?
I don't know what my stakeholders would say if I answered that question. But
theoretically, in your line of business, would it be possible for any company at all?
I would say it's needed, because we all need to share that risk. And since we're doing all the way from buying land to facilitate the buildings that we put there, we need to take the risk, but we need to also be able to discuss the risk. We need to mitigate the risk together in the projects.
Angie, you had a customer client that prohibited you in a way from doing drawings if they were unnecessary, meaning, I guess, that billing of hours was a little harder. What do you think about business models? Do they reward good cooperation and joint work the way you did, and how did you solve that issue?
I think I can answer more from the perspective of the architects. I can tell you, John, that if I'm not good at anything else, I'm good at looking at the bigger picture. And a big part of what we do as technology experts is to see who is doing what, who needs what, and connect the dots. And now I'm going to say something that might be a bit controversial in the context of our socialist culture. So don't block me from Facebook or anything. I say this with pain, but we cannot continue having in permanent staff all the expertise that we're going to need in the future. The future is going to be interdisciplinary, and we cannot stay only within our discipline to solve the needs that we will have. And this is a moving target, which means that you will need to have a lot of resources coming from different specialties because we don't have time to learn everything ourselves. So my advice would be bite the milk and not the cow, to allow yourself the flexibility to change strategy and adapt your goals quickly with the knowledge that you need that is going to be state of the art.
Right. Anyone want to comment on that? Do you? Yeah.
I think it's also interesting what you're saying, because I think also within the architectural field, the discipline architect is also not the same as it has been over the years, and it's shifting over time. There's specializations, there's expertise, so I completely agree to what you're saying. It's like there's a shift happening and has been happening since, I don't know, 80s already. So, yeah.
Stockholm, any follow-ups? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I just came out of a presentation where Don Engström at Plan B, he was talking about this, and he said pretty much that there will be a major shift. He sees that design will be free 2030. Even if he's just a little bit right in that, of course, then we need to rethink how we work and how our business models.
Of course, did he provide an answer?
No. Maybe next year.
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, you need to come next year too.
Yeah, exactly. And Don will provide the answer. He had no idea, poor guy. Okay, so that's what happens. Anyway, okay, so the last and final claim of this session then, claim number 5. The value of the digital model is not appreciated as it should be. This pertains to monetization of building operations BIM, which is, of course, one aspect of it, whether we can become better at creating values in the digital twinning and identifying values in digital twinning earlier on in the process. And of course, also the cultural aspect. Is there a resistance, as per your research, Kristine, on architects' involvement or enthusiasm for digital work and such? Kristine, do we underestimate the value of the digital models?
Yeah, I think, well, digital twin can be so many different things, as we heard today as well. So it's a question of what sort of digital twin are we talking about? Are we actually talking about a digital twin continuously throughout the life cycle as well, being updated with all the information and managed? Or what is the information we deliver to the clients as well? What do they need? Because very often you get like overload of requirements from the client, and then in a curious way asking them, what do you use it for? There is no answer because we might need it, and there's no information at the moment what this model or information will be used for. So I'm very curious of how this is going to develop further, and also knowing of how the clients will maybe also condense these requirements into something that might be more understandable and useful in the life cycle of the building as well.
Linn, monetizing building operations BIM, is that something that you can see happening, or is that one of the solutions?
Hard to answer. I just want to go back on the previous. I think it's an interesting topic to discuss the digital twins, because we don't see what it's needed for today. But I would love to see it as a consultant. Now I'm not a consultant, but if I were a consultant, how could I leverage on the data that I deliver today when I get the project back in 15 years and going to remodel? So we need to rethink what the digital twin could do for every other consultant or every other contractor. We barely don't know what we are going to use it for today. But if there is information there in 15, 20 years when we're going to remodel because we have a new tenant or whatever, how could we use it then? So we have to rethink that process. And I think that's really important to have with us, that digital twin is something that we need to explore more, because that's where the money are today.
And that would require a continued collaboration with other stakeholders and interested parties as well, right? To get a good baseline for that long-term perspective. Yeah. So that would be an argument for increased collaboration within the industry, right?
Yeah, and that's back to what Angie said, that you have to form another kind of team. We're really happy with saying I'm working on my project today. It's my project, and my project. It's not our project or the product that's going to be there that we can iterate on several times.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our time. We made it through the 5 claims. We heard some provocative answers, perhaps. A lot of good plenty of exciting thoughts and good ideas on how and why we need to rethink business models. On that note, thank you, Angie, Martin, Kristina, Linn, Per-Ole, and Pontus.